Interesting. Totally forgot to record it too. That's crazy. All right. Anyway, now what does gods do, right? Let's just quickly scan that. So they control every aspect of the world, right? I mean, myth. Jupiter was a master of gods and the main god of the Romans. Juno was the wife of Jupiter and goddess of the women fertility. Mars was the god of war, and Venus was the goddess of the love and beauty. Okay. Next one. How did they honor the gods, right? Each family would have a small altar and shrine, right? The shrines contain statues, and the head of the household led family prayers around each day. Now, I wanted to show you the augur. This is how the augur would look, and you can see this is where he would mention, he would open the skies for the auspice, and then predictions that he would make toward that, and then. So basically, we already went through this slide. So we'll just go back. How did they dishonor God? There's something like that as well happened. Practice of deification. Caesar Augustus allowed emperors to be worshipped as gods, and the cult of the emperor started to take place of the old state religion in the provinces. Okay, the Persian religion was renewed, however, by Caesar Augustus. So initially they, implemented it, and then they said no, the emperor cannot be God. So then in Rome, it was permitted to worship an emperor while he still lived. At his death, Augustus, son of the god, was himself declared a god. His strategy had worked. He's not worshipped when he's alive. So.
Well, let's say he's not worshipped in Rome while he's alive.
Correct.
But he is worshipped outside of Rome.
Right. So now, we talk about festivals. We mentioned, one, but let's just go through it. So religion in ancient Rome. Religion in ancient Rome. And, Latin festivals were called Feri, right? And so many times the priests in various colleges performed sacrifices and religious rites, and they were required during a festival. Festivals could be held in private or public, depending on the occasion. Public festivals will accommodate elaborate games, feasts, and sacrifices. The festival of Saturnalia, I want to just mention two festivals. Saturnalia was held in late December, and the festival honored god Saturn, who was the god of the agriculture. The holiday was celebrated with sacrifices at the temple of Saturn, which was then followed by the private gift giving. Does it remind you of something? Saturnalia reminds you of the Christmas. So they basically, private gift giving, and then in turn followed by a massive feast and party. Many of the customs influenced modern day Christmas. Another important festival was Lupercalia. A male goat and a dog were sacrificed under the supervision of the Flamen, I already mentioned, of the Jupiter, which was the line above the Stalkis. The rites were performed in a cave where the Romans believed the female wolf cared for the Romulus and Remus. After the sacrifices, the two Luperci, as they were called, approached the altar. Their foreheads would be anointed with sacrificed blood. Next, the elaborate feast was held, after which the Luperci cut skins from the sacrificed goats. The Luperci then wear the goat skins. After that, they would complete a circuit around Palatine Hill back to the cave where the sacrifice had been performed. We know Palatine Hill was one of the districts in Rome. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar used this festival as a means to determine if a Roman citizen would support him as a king. It just so happened that his most trusted deputy, Mark Antony, was participating in festival, and he was a Luperci. Caesar devised a scheme to have Mark Antony offer him a wreath of laurel, but when the wreath was offered, only a few Roman citizens applauded. So Caesar rejected the offer. Once again, Antony offered this wreath again. Only a few people cheered. Caesar had his answer just 1 month later. He was assassinated. So that's how people, I guess, at that time despised. Let's look at the temple.
Well, one question about the festivals. Did they have like carnival where the people dress doing something else, or that's come later?
It's come later. They didn't have any carnivals. I don't believe so. I think carnival is more like in medieval time, and and people surviving during plague and all that other stuff. I don't think there was any carnivals. There was actually, obviously the gladiator fights, which was taken after Etruscans, but Etruscans used gladiator fights during the funeral procession, so it was completely misconstrued and used as a celebratory thing.
They're actually not. There's actually two stories. I'll get into that next week. There's actually two stories. The really interesting about the gladiators, what they did originally is they take a couple of slaves and sacrifice them, and at some point somebody said it'd be more merciful to give them swords and have them fight to the death.
Correct.
But there were also some festivals when the Romans served their slaves. They kind of changed places. You remember?
Yeah, I
Which
think
that
was
is
the
kind of
Saturnalia.
carnival. I mean,
Yeah.
you dress, you dress and you become someone else.
Yeah, I think by any reasonable interpretation, the Saturnalia was a huge carnival.
Yeah. I think that's when they changed. Yeah.
Right.
But-
I'm reading off an article from on the web which says, in many Roman households, a mock king was chosen, the Saturnalicus princeps, or leader of Saturnalia, sometimes also called the Lord of Misrule. Usually a lowlier member of the household, this figure was responsible for making mischief
Yeah.
during the celebrations, insulting guests, wearing crazy clothing, chasing women and girls, etc.
By the way, I think that similarity, whatever the similar things between the Greco-Roman religion and Christianity or Judeo-Christianity, I think it's more coming from Greco-Roman into Judeo-Christian rather than the other way around. It's because I think especially Christianity was very much influenced by Greek religion.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, though let me just add to this discussion. I think the point that Marika made was really a great point, that in both Greek and Roman cultures were known as shame cultures, whereas in the Judeo-Christian tradition you have, rather than shame, the important thing is guilt. So guilt is your internal sense that you've done something wrong. The shame culture is an external sense where people look at you as being shameful. So that idea that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, that it's about what you believe. Sin is something that you feel, in addition to things that you do. Whereas the polytheistic religions were performative almost exclusively.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Marika. So now we're coming to temple. Every city had a temple, right? As you can see, and here there's the most famous temple, Jupiter. But basically, this has a cult image of deity whom the temples has dedicated. So every city had a temple, and every temple would dedicate it to a deity, right? There's usually altar for libations, where we've mentioned that, or sacrifices. The location of the temple was determined by augur. So if augur goes in and doesn't bless the land where the temple is built, it's not a temple. We're taking auspices in order to ensure the temple was sanctioned by God. If the temple was not consecrated by the augur, it could be used as a temple. It couldn't be used as a temple. So the structure ended up as shrine or something like that. Earlier temples were constructed, by in Etruscan style. So Roma's earlier temples were, constructed by. And in fact, if you look at this temple, it was constructed in the Etruscan style, and then it got burned later on, and then they rebuilt it in the Greek style, which is Temple of Jupiter now. So later Roman temples were constructed in the Greek style. Either space of the temple contained statue of the god in question, who Zeus, or whoever it is, and Jupiter, I'm sorry. And often there would be an altar where a sacrifice could be performed. Temples in Rome might be adorned with spoils of war taken from other cities. Temples were maintained at the expense of Roman treasuries. So all of them are basically supported by government. Priests oversaw day-to-day operations of the temple. Many of the menial tasks were assigned to slaves. One of the most important temples in Rome was the Temple of Jupiter, which was actually referred to a temple of the Jupiter Optimus Maximus, which is this temple. And how do I expand this so this way you guys can see? I'll open up later in the presenting mode to see this. Anyway, it was not only the most oldest temple in Rome, but the most largest as well. Originally, the temple was constructed by Etruscans, but later the Republic it burned down, so it was rebuilt in the Greek style. So let me just put it in a present mode so you can see the temple a little bit bigger. And if I can zoom. No. All right, that's that. All right, let's go to the next. All right, and then we already spoke about funerals, but as I've mentioned, they burned their deceased. Initially, they were buried, and then later on, they start burning them. That's basically it. That's my whole presentation. Sorry, guys, for this whole mishap. At the end, I was able to pull it off. The rabbit out of the hat. Any other addition?
On the question of funerals,
Yeah.
among the Romans and the Greeks, you were not permitted to bury somebody inside the walls of the city. You had to bury them outside. And therefore, the idea that Caesar was put on a funeral pyre in the Forum was a tremendous new thing. I mean, it was the crowd demanded it, and it had never been done before. This was a completely unique occurrence, and it was supposedly the time when Caesar became immortal.
Interesting. So the important stuff about funerals, thank you, Paul, is funerals were also important in ancient Rome. After the individual passed away, a coin was placed on the body. This was done to pay the ferryman inmate. Early on, the deceased would have been buried. Later in the Republic, the Romans began to burn their dead. The body was laid out in a pile, the pile of the wood, and then burned. Cups of oil, food, and other things which were favored by the deceased were also thrown upon the flames. So they threw food, oil, and all this stuff that you like to eat and drink. If recently deceased was a person of some importance, the funeral procession was allowed to be moved through the Forum. So they basically, as you can see here, they're moving it through the Forum, and then the funerals was for the general. If the funeral was for a general or the emperor, major general, emperor, the soldiers marched 3 times around the fire. So basically, it was very organized in that matter.
Zach, do we know anything about what do they do with everybody else when they die? I mean, do they?
Yeah,
they have to.
The body
they
was,
burn them, or they
burn them. Yeah, I mean, they burn them. And again, probably also at the time, there was all these things we haven't come to the Justinian plague, but there was probably some other plagues that were going on. So they were probably also conscientious outside of the god, not to get anything passed on as well. But the emperor and general were actually burned, after the soldier would pass them 3 times, and they'll walk them through the Forum. So it was an important type of, procession. Everybody else was just, the coins were, put up on their body, and then they were burned.
The famous road, the Appian Way, was lined with tombs, because as I said, you could not bury bodies inside the city limits. So the Appian Way, which was the first of the major Roman roads that was built, was lined with mausoleums and tombs for many miles outside of Rome. As far as archaeology is concerned, only the rich got very elaborate funerals and elaborate tombs. So by and large, we really don't know very much about what happened to the common people. We don't really have many remains.
Hey, this is Gail. I remember Mary Beard did a program that talked about in the city, they found vaults and kind of tombs with cremated remains in little pigeonholes. And the walls were like 20 or 30 feet high. And the inscriptions seemed to be coming from middle class or regular class
I think you're
people.
talking about the catacombs.
I think there was, I don't think it was the Roman catacombs. It was,
Yeah,
they
I remember seeing it in the book. It's not the catacombs.
Oh, yeah.
It's, they were like, they recently found them under buildings, but they were these huge vaults that were pigeonholes in the walls. And then the placard in front was an inscription or a dedication to the person that died. And they seemed to be, at least Mary Beard was thinking that they were regular middle-class type people.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember
there's a
seeing
whole
that.
documentary on that, right? You know, where I don't know if it was Mary Beard, but there's a documentary on BBC and also on where she talks about how the little kids were buried, and it would be their stories that are written on the scripture, who they were and what they did. I remember this little kid didn't achieve anything, but they would say she was a playful little, let's say girl named, whatever it is named, and she played with little sheep. Or they'll talk about there's a merchant that was buried, he did this, he did that, and stuff like that. They'll write the stories, of those people. So there must be, the whole, people were writing those eulogies that would put on it, and they were written almost in poetic type of atmosphere. So it's interesting. It's interesting to if you can get a hold of that documentary. It's on YouTube everywhere, and she talks about the stories. The catacombs talk to us through deceased, basically.
I'll get into a bit of that next week. There's lots of tomb inscriptions for gladiators, but yeah, I mean, if you're working class, you couldn't afford an elaborate tomb. You're going to get into this. I had to run out to the Mount Pleasant Cemetery here in Toronto and photograph some couple of tombs there. They're pretty wild. I'm sure you should do this in New York.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, for sure. But it's very fascinating that the way they had. I mean, we didn't even get to Christianity. It was completely, obviously different. But this is, I mean, in doing research for this, I'm, it was an interesting subject matter. The short research that I did, but I loved it. It's a very structured, like everything Romans did. I think it was even more structured than the Roman army.
Zach, by the way, you showed very quickly the schedule, and I was surprised that it was kind of out of order. I didn't realize that. So we'll get to that.
Some things that people want to move around.
Yeah, but it seems like I didn't realize that we're going like every week. No.
No, actually, it was twice this week. Let me just pull it up again. All right.
Mhm.
Sorry, guys.
Mhm.
Pulling up the schedule.
Yeah, because I know some of it was not scheduled yet, and others that are later already scheduled. I mean, something.
What are you talking about, my friend?
Okay, let's see.
Hold on, I can't see it. What the hell? Let me just stop share for a second. 1 second. This is ridiculous. 1 second. Let me just pull it up. Let me pull up the schedule. Close this.
Probably should stop recording.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. All right.
I'll stop.